Welcome everyone to Cyber Judo. I'm your host, Christian Scott with the team at Tantalum Security. And also welcome back to episode 2 of our 6-part webcast series on responsible AI adoption, where we're going to be talking through some of the practical roadmaps, tips, and tricks for adopting AI securely and responsibility for your organization at scale. As always, I'm joined by my compliance bestie, Pat here from the Active Compliance and Ethics Group team. Pat brings a lot of governance compliance perspective, while I'll be focusing a little bit more on the technical and cybersecurity aspects of things as usual. If you are joining us on LinkedIn Live or YouTube, just remember that we love to hear folks' questions, get folks' feedback. You can always comment, and we'll see those comments come in, those questions come in, and we can help address some of those in real time. This is not just about helping educate folks, but also having a conversation. To that, we also like to share everything in this series is all about real world practitioner expertise and helping organizations build and mature their AI programs, from small investment firms all the way up through large enterprises. Like everything we do here at Cyber Judo, the series is completely free, no sponsors, no advertisements, no registration walls, just real practical guidance to help folks improve their security postures, help improve their compliance posture, help ensure that there's governance when they're deploying AI throughout their businesses, and making sure that they can leverage that to scale. Before we dive in, Pat, why don't you remind the folks who are joining us here a little bit about yourself and your background, and then I'll start to jump into our main topic for today.
Well, thank you, Christian, and thank you for inviting me again to join you on these sessions. Yes, my name is Pat Quetley. I'm the CEO of Active Compliance and Ethics Group and the co-founder of the Canadian Center of Excellence for Anti-Corruption. So I've got background in compliance, investigation, risk management, and of course, AI governance. I'm on the ISO committee for AI governance 42001, and I've got a passion for risk management and investigation.
I absolutely love it. You and I are two peas in a pod, good sir. So team, the topic today that we're going to be covering is buy versus building for AI. The kind of proposition here is the vendor risk that no one wants to own or talk about. So today we're going to be just covering a little bit around the concepts of the different ways AI enters the organization at first, then what leaders should be considering when they're deciding their buy versus build strategy, some of the aspects that we want to have in mind from like a due diligence perspective when we're acquiring new AI providers or technology providers to assist us with our AI adoption strategy. We'll also cover a little bit the cost considerations, operational considerations, what good governance actually looks like when you're buying and building AI solutions for your firm. And just as a reminder for everyone, this is, again, the second episode to a 6-part series that we have for you guys here. This 6-part series, by the way, is us getting together about every 2 weeks or every other week and going through the main topics of what does governance actually look like, buy versus build. I believe the next one that we have is going to be hunting the shadow AI. That's going to be a real fun one. So that's going to be around August 12th. And then August 26th is going to be deploying the right culture and technical control. So I'm really looking forward to that one, because I think that's going to be like peanut butter and jelly there,
yes,
Pat, you know? And then as we continue to kind of go through all the insights that we're trying to provide for you guys will see a lot of little tips and tricks on screen here. We might have some folks also drop those links on YouTube and on LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff for you guys to follow along and be able to click those links and get that content. So with all that being noted and kicking us off, the last session, we talked about governance and ownership and where did that demarcation point lie for the organization, how to build an AI tiger team and all that kind of stuff. Now we're really diving into, okay, should we buy or should we build something for our organization? And unfortunately, that decision is made too often without understanding some of the long-term operational and security and compliance implications of that process. So Pat, good sir, why don't you start off talking a little bit about like the different paths that AI makes into the firm, because sometimes it's not always a specific decision that someone's making at that point in time. It just kind of sometimes organically starts to come in. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, let me count the ways on how organizations are exposed to AI. From traditional perspective, if you look at SaaS, even Microsoft now, you've got Google, everything that you use has got connection with AI. So you can't get away from it. It's like a really bad friend that you can't get rid of. It is absolutely integrated in everything that we do. And this is where people need to understand is that they're exposed to AI on a daily, even if they're not buying, you know, solutions, AI solutions, they are exposed to AI and the vectors of risk with AI, external and internal. You've got shadow AI, just people, their employees, bring AI without authority or without approval from the organization. But
Mhm.
now you've got a new layer of risk with vibe coding and shadow code, where people are using their ability to create new application, but without thinking of the risk that they're bringing within the organization itself. Because where is the governance? Where is cybersecurity? So what's important here is that people need to have an inventory not only of the AI tool, but their exposure. How are they exposed to AI? Where is it entering the organization? Because it's one thing to manage traditional SaaS software, but with AI, it's like a bad virus. It can replicate and it can really infect the organization in a way that people, if they're not prepared, if they don't have the right structure and controls and the right outlook of really identifying where they are most vulnerable, they're going to be facing a huge amount of risk that they're not prepared for. So, first and foremost, is understanding their risk profile and how AI is being used within the organization.
So that's a really good set of points that you've made there. And working with a lot of organizations, just from my own perspective, it's also just like starting out with being pragmatic, right? Of like, hey, we should start making an inventory or a list of things, even manually, right? Like,
Yes,
hey, these are the AI solutions that we're intentional about starting to leverage and utilize, how we want to utilize them, some of maybe like the skills or the plugins that we want to have. Starting there is like a really good foundational point that sometimes I think
absolutely.
just completely breeze over, thinking like, let me go purchase this technology thing. It's going to do all this AI discovery stuff. Like, well, first just be intentional with what you want to use, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the first and foremost is to understand what do you have in place. And there's so many organizations you and I are working with, they don't even understand. They don't even know what they have in place, how their employees are bringing AI because of the pressure, because of lack of policy, lack of control. So it's a huge risk vector and risk profile that they need to really manage and understand so that they can really put the governance structure in place to limit and reduce the impact of those risks within the organization.
That makes a lot of sense. So then diving, really into that topic of the buy versus build, I have had it very frequently in sit down conversations with other AI evangelists and all that type of stuff. And people will say, well, the situation depends. It depends. It depends. And for a lack of coming off as someone who maybe forgoes nuance, right? I actually believe that for 90% of knowledge work-based firms and organizations, the approach is to do a bit of both. You can't, start out with just building your own AI tech stack in a vacuum with never ever leveraging any of the frontier models and their harnesses being the application they
Yep.
operate in. So like Claude Chat and Cowork and Chat GPT and Codex and whatnot. You can't build your own version of that thing in a vacuum and then try to replicate like Chat GPT without any, context. I've worked with some firms where they built their own AI tech stack. That's how they approach the conversation. That's how they approach the situation, a year ago. And they just tried to create their own ChatGPT clone. And what they realized was it wasn't about asking the questions and getting a response back. that wasn't how the tech stack was supposed to be when we talk about AI. It was a lot more of like, well, what processes actually in our firm that intersect between departments and teams and the existing tech stack where we should intelligently insert AI to help transpose data or to do some light level of analysis and whatnot. That's the thing that's going to help them the most, right? And I think sometimes teams and individuals, the way that they're able to start to get into that mindset is they have to play with some of the tooling. That tooling has to be kind of in people's hands just a little bit, which is to a certain degree kind of sounds a little bit ass backwards in the sense of like, well, hey, we got these tools, but we haven't completely defined how we want to use it yet. There's a little bit of that experimental phase, right? That where you're doing your proof of concept, like trialing and deployments and all that. But I think that 90% of firms, what I suggest is this, is you first and foremost, you have to leverage the technology that's out there today to remain competitive, right? So you got all these, again, frontier models, frontier harnesses, figure out, if it's, blue team, red team, orange team, green team, whatever you are looking for, figure out what that is, defining what your security, governance, and compliance considerations are, and then line it up to your operational processes. But don't stop there, because if you just put, again, an AI model with a harness into people's hands and you stop there, you really lose the fact of integrating it with the rest of your operational business processes. And so what you should be doing at the same time with that initial adoption is having a second track for the mid to long term, which is we need to centralize our business data. We have to now document the business work streams and workflows all the way from the origination of an opportunity or something occurring in the business, and that going through sales or marketing or whatever that may be, and then all the way to revenue generation and being able to understand what the profitability of the business is. Okay, now that we've defined those workflows and those work streams, now we can figure out where we can intelligently consolidate tools, consolidate data, consolidate rework across teams. Because a lot of times, when you're doing all this, you got to go back and you got to document and you find all this operational and tech debt. You're like, wow, actually, as we were kind of going through this, we have 3 teams that are doing the same kind of duplicative thing right now. So you're going to unearth a lot of those types of skeletons in that process, right? But as you do that with leveraging the frontier model kind of providers first, obviously you need to govern them, you need to secure them, you need to have technical controls, you need to have oversight over them, you need to train staff on them, but build that long-term track of your company's operating system and how AI is going to leverage and is going to be layered on top of your company's operating system. If you continue to try to just layer regular frontier models with their harnesses onto a business that is filled with a bunch of operational debt or technology debt, you're not going to really see a full benefits, because someone can leverage something to be productive in maybe one particular task. But then when it goes to intersect across departments, there's bureaucracy, there's politics and all that really first needs to get figured out for the long term. That's where you build towards that long-term strategy there. Now, of course, there's a lot of implications of that. And I think that people should be just really considerate that even when you're buying, there's only so much that you're actually really delegating to that provider. You should really, and I know, Pat, you're going to dive into all the due diligence here and whatnot, but really take a look at the terms of service of what you're getting, because more often than not, the warranties, and there's a lot of limitations, right? On what is guaranteed to you. And so much of that shared responsibility model that you're going to still have, even when you go to buy something, let's say a Claude from Anthropic, you can't just assume that just because we have Claude Enterprise, everything is 100% good, it's already taken care of. A lot of these enterprise AI solutions today are not fully enterprise yet. They lack a lot of the visibility that you want to see and prompt interactions. They're deploying out a lot of new products or sub-products that don't have even the same feature parity. So for example, if you're using Claude Chat, they got a compliance API. You're using Claude Cowork, the compliance API hasn't been fully developed for that yet. So you can use the open telemetry model for Claude Cowork. The same consideration goes for Anthropic just released Claude tags for Slack. They're deprecating the old Claude for Slack. The Claude tags isn't fully baked in regards to all the compliance and security functions, right? So these providers are obviously moving people forward at a breakneck pace and calling it enterprise, when still you're going to really have to think about all those risks that you're going to be taking and where you need to fill in those gaps with either other technology controls or a methodical governance process, so that you're aware that they're from a shared responsibility model standpoint. Anthropic's not just going to take all that risk for you. They don't already have it all figured out. And I think, by the way, to my last note, as I go to pass this off to you here and talk about the due diligence, because it sounds like there's a lot of due diligence, obviously, here, Pat, is the aspect that these AI providers are changing so quickly, it starts to cause change fatigue for staff members.
Exactly.
There was, hey, we got Claude for Slack. Now we got, Claude tags. Now we got this feature. Now we got this feature, this feature. Oh, hey, by the way, all these features on all these new sub products and products, they're all beta. Oh, hey, by the way, you can't do this thing. Oh, but now you can do this thing. Oh, you can't do that thing anymore because it's done over here this way. That starts to cause change fatigue for staff members, and it's very difficult to build operational processes on that. And so again, when you think about the mid to long term for your business, doesn't matter what size you are, doesn't matter what vertical you operate in. If you're a knowledge work type of business, then you should develop a long-term strategy for where your data lives, what your business operational processes are going to be, where you want AI to overlay onto that, because just trusting that those AI providers are going to do you good in the long term is likely not going to be the case to get you the best bang for your buck. So that being noted, and getting the best bang for the buck, Pat, good sir.
Yes, sir.
A little bit about these due diligence considerations, especially when buying potential AI solutions and technology providers.
Well, I mean, everything that you listed basically increased the anxiety and the blood pressure of people that were listening. Okay, so you scared the heck out of them. Okay, and then you add to this equation the FOMO effect. We must have and deploy AI, and it is a recipe for disaster for anybody. You've got all these stacks, all these new models, all these new features. People can't even keep up. So they're looking at this and say, what do I do? What question do I need to ask? Well, first of all, you mentioned it. You have to have a plan. You have to have a strategy. What are you using this for? And it's not just, you can't just plug it in and hope it works. Okay, it needs to be tied to workflows and use cases. But first and foremost, when you look at solutions, whether you buy or build, is you have to do a due diligence process. You need to ask the right question, because just relying on the claims that the providers are making, that's not going to save you. And if you're working in any regulated space where you have data privacy, when you have IP, when you have reportable regulatory reporting requirements, you need to increase your due diligence when you're looking at adopting a buy or build solution. But ultimately, is what do you do? What do you do to make sure that you are addressing all of the concerns, and that you have a process in place that will help you answer the questions and increase your ability to manage the risk, to have a good governance process in place. But you need to be able to make your provider accountable. And you mentioned contract and details, but if you don't know what questions to ask, you're going to have difficulty. So really, if we can help you in identifying 6 real pillars where you need to really concentrate your questions. And those pillars is basically to be able to give you not a level of high assurance, but a level of assurance that you will be able to manage those risks and not just take on all the liability and risk, but shared responsibility with your service provider or your AI solution provider. And first of all, model transparency. Is it proprietary? What output? What auditability? What processes they have in place? Data governance, because that's data privacy, and IP. What do they have in place to make sure that they are protecting your data that is in line with regulations, with if you're operating in EU, if you've got clients in the EU, is it aligned with the EU AI Act? From a security and resilience perspective, what safeguards do they have in place? What proof? Because it's not just about making claims and saying, yes, we are SOC compliant, we have this. You need to ask them to provide proof in terms of auditability, in terms of chain of thought, in terms of performance. And performance control is about hallucination, the model drifting, the human in the loop. What type of controls do you have in place? Because if you don't have the right governance framework that allows human intervention, that you can flip the switch, you can really report on what and have an eye on where failure could occur, then you're not managing, you cannot manage your risk properly. And of course, compliance alignment. Is it aligned with the latest and regulatory framework from ISO, from NIST, from OECD, all of the best practices? Are they aligned with those best practices? And ask those questions. And they can't give you the guarantee. And some of the warranties are we'll give you, if something happens, we will be able to refund you the last 3 months of fees. Well, that's not good enough. You need to be able to up your game and ask them for actual warranties or assurances that is enforceable as well. And of course, in terms of portability, scalability, because if this doesn't work, if you're not satisfied with your provider, are you locked in with that company, or is it transportable? Are you going to be able to have another purveyor or another service provider come in without having too much cost or too many costs or too many trouble to be able to have the transportability? So all these questions need to be asked so that you can move forward with some level of assurance that you can scale it up and that you're addressing your risk profile.
You make a lot of really good points there. And I really gravitate towards that last one in particular, especially when giving tips and advice to business leaders on as they interface with their technology teams and their AI strategy team, which is, hey, always ask the question, what does it look like the next day after we fire that provider? What does it look like? Is the scaffolding that we built around that AI provider, that AI solution, whatever it may be, is the scaffolding reusable? And we can put something else in there, inject another comparable solution? Or do we lose all that progress, all that hard work and effort of building around one thing? So
yeah, if I can add to, you got to be careful with service providers. You've got that customization tax, because they can say right off the bat, it's going to cost you X amount of money. But really, is it adapted to your workflow, to your use cases? Or how much is it going to cost to customize it? Because when you evaluate the overall cost, it's not just the cost of the software itself. What about the updates? What about the token costs now that have to be taken into account? So all this needs to come into your equation.
Actually, I think that's a natural segue into talking about the subsidy trap, good sir, right? Because
absolutely,
at the end of the day, that's why you need to make sure that whatever you're building is portable. So if you're already a firm, you're like, hey, we got all these GPTs that we've created, or we got all these cloud skills we created. Okay, great. Do we have the original blueprints so that we could translate that to the other or vice versa and make sure it's portable? Or when we're building, let's say some custom MCP servers and data connectors to this data source and to this data source, is it going to work with multiple providers? Is it compatible with multiple providers? So the team, if you solely depend on a frontier model provider and their harnesses in the long term, you will end up running a massive bill up for your organization in that process. And the reason being is this: even if you start with Claude Teams today or ChatGPT Business, those are currently highly, highly subsidized models. You're paying for a seat today. That is obviously changing. And the history of the last 5 years really demonstrates that. There have been a lot of solutions that have moved from a seat-based system for using AI to now a cost-based system. Everyone has been seeing what Anthropic has been doing and moving more and more towards that model and that structure. They're hoping to really do that with Fable, but given the competitiveness with OpenAI, they decided to have Fable be some level of a component with the subsidized model still. But practical example is Microsoft with GitHub Copilot. So GitHub Copilot, for longest time, you pay per seat. And they just moved that to, again, a purely cost utilization model. So you should keep that in mind, that when you're adopting AI within your business and you're defining your workflows and all that, you can potentially run up a massive bill if you're not considerate of the seat versus the actual token cost. You compare somebody who's using something like, let's say, a Claude Max 20 level subscription, and what that actual token burn is. That token burn is going to be anywhere from about $5,000 up to about $8,000 plus or minus. They don't necessarily put out the specific numbers for all of this, but you can basically infer it a little bit as you push up against the subsidized models and leverage it. So the subsidized costs today rarely reflect the future costs. So when you're building something long-term for your business, you want to just keep that in mind, that the pricing is only going to go up. Number two is, even though when you graph the cost per token over time, over the last 5 years, that has gone down actually quite significantly. But there's also the fact that we're using a lot more tokens now for all the reasoning models. So when you actually factor in that, the cost for leveraging AI to perform various reasoning tasks is now an order of magnitude much more expensive than if you were just using a chat, previously 2 years ago, right? And then there's also the factor of Jevons paradox. And everyone, I think, generally is familiar with Jevons paradox, where you try to solve a problem that's a utilization problem, and what you do is you try to add more capacity to the system. Might be something like a highway, and you think, well, we can make the highway, we can add more lanes to the highway to help reduce traffic jams. And inevitably, when you add more lanes to the highway to reduce traffic jams, what do you find out? The traffic jams are still there or now worse. Why? Well, because there's this factor that when something is immediately available to people and it seems like it's in a plentiful quantity, they're going to consume more of it. And it's the same factor with deploying AI, not just now giving it to people that ask questions, but saying, okay, now we're going to integrate it into these processes. Now we're going to integrate it to these processes. Now we're going to integrate it to these processes. So that's going to exponentially increase in cost, and you're going to want to be aware of that. Also, the element of when we talk about these costs, to your point, Pat, the vendor lock-in. You want to make sure that as your business is continuing to grow and scale, every single set of plugins, data connectors, all that type of stuff that you're building are going to be things that can be, if not right now, potentially in the near future, multi-provider capable, right? You can think of just an easy factor of this. If we have ChatGPT, we have Claude, and our business has a bunch of data connectors in our place that are proprietary for each one, beyond the fact that the costs can get insanely out of hand, and you're running, let's say, maybe you run different MCP servers over here and different MCP servers over here, and you got all the AWS or Azure cloud computing costs associated with that. Now it's all duplicative, and now you got the complexity of having to try to manage two stacks at the same time. Rather look for where you can intersect things. Like, for example, MCP, a really good MCP solution that's open source that I've leveraged is executor.sh, which means that you can connect all of your different data connectors in one place, govern them in one place, have your cost utilization telemetry in one place, but Claude can talk to it. ChatGPT can talk to it. Cursor can talk to it. So now you're kind of choke pointing or a bottlenecking and forcing kind of everything from like a governance and design standpoint to the same place. And that just makes it a lot easier to manage, to have better cost information for yourselves as business leaders, and be able to kind of project for that. But all that noted, Pat, before we jumped on here, you and I were actually just talking about the element of like duplicative workflows. Do you want to hit into that and then maybe continue on talking a little bit about the considerations for operational dependency and business continuity?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the duplicate workflows, where you're going to have different solutions or different costs,
Yeah.
and apply to something that is very similar. So people, are driving the application or deployment of AI as this is going to save us so much time, so much effort, but they're not stopping and really assessing says, okay, where are we getting the benefit of it? And is this workflow using AI
Yeah.
can be transferred to other use cases and workflows that are very similar for the same cost, as opposed to, oh, let's this, because of work in silos. We used to work in silos instead of really sharing, okay, if you're using it this way in your operation, can we use that also in ours with a little bit of tweaking without having to create a brand new tool and having a higher cost? You
Yeah.
have to evaluate where are you getting into benefits and how can you utilize it and transport it to other and but by viral effect. So the duplication here is where the cost comes in, because if it's like buying four cars to do the same thing where one can do
Yeah.
it for you.
Yeah, well, certainly. And then, I mean, just on this kind of theme of the portability and all that, what are some of the main elements that you really, in your interactions with customers and with folks trying to educate them, what are the main considerations around like the operational dependencies and like business continuity?
Well, if you look at traditional software, we've been using Microsoft and other software for God knows how many years before the full AI came in.
Hmm.
Well, when something went wrong with the software, it didn't really disrupt the operation. Okay, I mean, you could do it manually. You had other solutions. Now with embedding AI within the organization, you're becoming dependent on the tool and the results of it. And the more dependent on it you are, the more you are at risk of having a single point of failure in your organization that you can't, you will explode and will have huge ramification within the organization. Because if you just depend on it without any backup, without any business continuity plan, without a real way to evaluate where you are, this is where it's going to fail you and cause a huge amount of pain. So you need to have a business impact assessment.
The
Where how is the AI going to be able to going to be used? Where are the workflows? Where are the use cases? But if something happens,
Mhm.
how are you going to continue if it fails? Because we use the word if. It's not if, it's when. Let's be clear. It's when it fails. How are you going to be able to continue? Because if you don't have any plan or strategy in place, this is where it's going to be causing enormous risk and enormous exposure.
My experience actually has been quite often talking to people, and they're like, "Yeah, Claude's down right now, or ChatGPT is down right now, so I guess I'm gonna go get lunch, or I'm gonna go do some other stuff now," because people have now started to make it like part of their critical workflows, right? And so
Yeah,
that it can be truly disruptive.
and you remember during the COVID year,
Yeah.
okay? I mean, everybody had to navigate and switch on a dime because of what happened with COVID. Those that could do it well, or those that already had in place an infrastructure, already had the culture, the people in place to be able to adjust to the new reality. You know, going from live working with people to going on online. The same thing needs to be done with the deployment of AI. What do you have in place that when it fails, that you have a backup plan? When it fails, you have a way to be able to manage your business continuity without failure or higher cost. Because if you don't have this in place, it will happen. It will happen. You know, AI is not perfect. We've seen the headlines of major cybersecurity faults, major
Mhm.
problems. So if you are not prepared to unplug it if something happens, or if it goes down, uh, this is going to have huge negative impact on your operation and your reputation and your liability with customers and others.
If you could, good sir, that makes a lot of sense. Can you take that and sprinkle that into the rest of the life cycle as we kind of wrap up here, thinking about what like good governance looks like when adopting these AI solutions?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, you need to be aware of, from a regulatory perspective, what are the best practices out there? Okay, and follow it. It doesn't have to follow to the letter, but the basic thing, if you can remember, apart from what you're seeing on the screen here, from pre-procurement, onboarding, deployment, ongoing, and the exit, is what you have in place for a plan. What strategy do you have? How are you really identifying where you're going to get the most benefits out of using AI? The second point that's really important is how you're deploying it, how you're training your people, how you're monitoring the effectiveness of the AI tools out there. And the third major point for me is continuous improvement, so that you have quantifiable, reportable, documented proof of the effectiveness of what you have, and that you're mitigating the risk effectively, so that you're always continuously improving on it, so that it is a cycle of improvement. AI is exploding. It is changing and evolving on a huge, rapid pace that is very, very hard for people to manage. So if you have the right structure and the right governance in place, that's what's going to help you manage those risks, because it's not about being perfect, but it's having the infrastructure and the assurance and the confidence that you can manage whatever comes your way.
Something that you noted that really resonates with me is measuring the efficacy.
Yes.
Because you hear about it on the news. There's like two different types of camps and themes of organizations adopting AI, and then months later shedding a bunch of staff, saving a bunch of money because they figured out where AI works really well. That's at least one narrative. Right? I'm not saying that's true or not. And then there's the other narrative of you got all these organizations, they adopt AI, and now they're losing even more money, and it's even 20 times worse, right? That's another interesting narrative. Right? Obviously, the line or where the truth lies is somewhere in between. Certainly, it's not at either of those extremes. But what I can say, and to your point, is actually measuring for it. More times than not, firms, they're going to go purchase, hey, let me go get Claude Enterprise, or let me get ChatGPT Enterprise, and all that type of stuff. And the cost and utilization aspect is initially an afterthought. And I think that's a problematic approach. And the reason being is that to your point about duplicative teams, I have seen it where I work with firms, it'll be like a financial investment firm, and there'll be five different teams that were doing some level of, let's say, due diligence analysis on a potential acquisition target or some entity that they've acquired and that kind of stuff. Five different teams that are doing that same, essentially data munching, looking through a data room, yep, getting all this information about an organization, all that kind of stuff. And then they look at it in their own lens. So that's 5 times the cost, right, for people who are doing the same activity. And then they may all do it slightly different ways. So, we previously talked about, governance and design in our first session, and an aspect of like, hey, we should build curated skills that follow business operational processes that have our governance, our compliance, and our security methodology just like baked right into the skill, right? Well, if we also do that, that means that also each one of those teams, at least when they go to do it, the first cost saving is they'll at least all be doing it consistently with the same curated skill. Number 2 is, okay, now we have one curated skill that's for everyone. Maybe we can have that data from when it first gets to, the first person who runs that skill that goes to analyze, an entity or an organization, that data makes it to a place that lives somewhere everyone else can see it. The rest of the teams can see it. Wow, now we just reduced our cost by 5x for that particular activity and that type of interaction. So something that's just really important for folks to keep in mind, be it if you're building or you are buying or you're somewhere in between, which most firms are, is really thinking about where you can measure for that. So easy tips and tricks that I always recommend to folks. So again, start to look at where can we consolidate technical complexity. If we have a lot of different data connectors or MCP servers, let's find a solution to consolidate that. I mentioned executor.sh earlier. It's an open source solution. There's a lot of other great solutions that are in the space. By the way, let me do this. Let me make sure everyone's got a copy of this here. There's a bunch of other cool tools that are mentioned in there, some commercial, some open source, and all that fun stuff. But also, okay, now we have to have visibility into the security and compliance interactions of these, AI solutions within our business. So what was the prompt, the initial question? What was the answer back? What type of data connectors were invoked in that process? What type of data was processed by that AI request? Okay, well, maybe we should look at deploying something like LangFuse if we're going to be building something in-house that's going to help monitor and get that type of information. Or maybe we're going to have a model router that can handle that type of information as well, like LLM. If we're trying to, again, be really thrifty with cost and considerate of cost, and we're trying to reduce our dependency on any singular provider, and we're building our own custom harness, we're building our own custom stack, using something like LLM or some other type of AI router allows you to route your requests to different types of models for different types of activities so that you can get the best token utilization cost or whatnot. Or if one goes down, there's another one that's available that can handle any types of requests and whatnot. So that's something to think about. Another tip I like to give people is beyond being exposed to some of the compliance APIs that are with Claude or Anthropic Claude and OpenAI's ChatGPT, there's also open telemetry. So open telemetry is a great solution for getting information on what types of prompt interactions are occurring, what that prompt interaction was classified as. So again, maybe it was for performing a particular activity, like doing due diligence on a potential acquisition target or something like that. Great. Now what we can do is we can measure for the efficacy of what was the cost. Did we get the performance that we were looking for? Did we get the accuracy we were looking for? So we can be methodical about our approach and leveraging those different data points and metrics. So, Pat, good sir, as we wrap up, any last tips or tricks that you want to provide for folks before we
Yes. Let's remember, folks, that this is not rocket science, and we got to go back to basics here, that AI is your digital assistant. Okay, you're bringing this entity, this technology, absolutely phenomenal in terms of higher productivity. But remember, when you hired people, you're not just fire them because you're replacing them by AI. That's a really bad idea. But when you hired people for their skill set, well, you just didn't lead them go without any supervision. It's really important to understand that you can't, delegate your authority and your responsibility to AI. You are supervising this entity, okay? And you need to understand that you can't just let it go without any supervision or let it trust it without any supervision. You need to validate it. And it goes back to what we talked about in the first session. It's about the cross-functional team. The silos are there and exist today. The bad culture, AI is not going to save you from bad culture. It's going to increase the risk of a bad culture. Yeah. So it's important here that AI is not your savior. You are supervising. You are on top of this. And if you're not, that's where it's going to blow up in your face and blow up your company.
Yeah.
Because you can't relegate that responsibility to AI. You need to have those layers, that governance, but bringing the people together to eliminate the silos by having that tiger team, that cross-functional AI governance team that will allow you to scale up responsibly and limit your risk and exposure.
Yeah, certainly. I love this comment here. Sounds like we were change agents in the governance layer. Certainly. Yeah, that is, I think, a very big aspect of that.
Yes.
But I know, team, we're just about at time here. So, Pat, thank you again for another fantastic discussion, as always. I think today's conversation really highlights some of the really helpful points to consider with buying versus building AI, the kind of long-term strategy, not just focusing on the myopic moment, all that kind of stuff. I hope that a lot of the takeaways that we had here for folks were very practical and helpful. Certainly continue to kind of stay posted with what we're doing on LinkedIn team. There's always a lot of great content that both Pat's team and my team are always putting out, things like governance controls for, org instructions for like Claude and ChatGPT. Yeah. I know, Pat, we also put together some really great content for an AI risk management policy generator, and that's completely open source. That's Creative Commons, so folks can just do whatever they like with it. So that's wonderful.
So you have no excuse not to do it right then, right?
Yeah, right. There you go. Yeah, I mean, it's practically right there. You just
exactly. We're feeding you. Come on, guys.
But anyways, so our next webcast series is going to be on August 12th. That's where we're going to be talking about hunting the shadow AI. So that's going to be a really fun one for folks. And again, that's going to be really focusing in on identifying AI across the business, both from a more cultural governance standpoint, but also the deep technical controls. What are some of the tools that we can employ in this process to make our lives a little bit easier? And then talking about approval processes and all that. So I'm excited about that. As a reminder for folks, if you're just looking for an easy way to kind of stay up to date on all the webcasts that we have, be it if it's in the future and you're looking to just sign up on LinkedIn, so you got that event there, or you're looking to take a gander at previous recordings, you can also go to this link here down below, where that's all set up for you guys. And we're really looking forward to that next webcast.
Yeah.
That being noted,
and we invite you to share your thoughts, share your questions, so that we can, increase that knowledge base of everybody that is interested in this time.
Yeah, I love it. So team, don't forget to follow Tantalum Security and Active Compliance Ethics Group on LinkedIn. We'll continue to share a lot of great content. Thank you so much for joining us. And Pat, thank you again for being an awesome partner on this webcast series. Enjoy the rest of your day.